You've just been on a tour of Michigan, a listening tour from Kalamazoo all the way to Detroit, and everything in between. What did you hear from voters and Michiganders the most?
Well, affordability is top of mind for everyone, from affordable housing to being able to afford to heat those homes or cool those homes in summers like this. And then safety of drinking water, safety in your own community, the ability to breathe clean air. Basic cost of living issues are top of mind for everyone, affordability, and then health and safety of all of our residents. What's abundantly clear to me is that everyone around the state want their loved ones to be happy and healthy and safe and nearby. And as the cost of living continues to increase for everyone, people are feeling that pain, feeling that pinch, especially with wages being stagnant. So I believe that the next governor of Michigan needs to be able to address the affordability and cost of living in this state. And that's something that I'm uniquely prepared to do and have been doing as Secretary of State already. What
surprised you? Was there a thread of something that came out that you weren't expecting?
I think two things. One, the ways in which state government has been inefficient. I'm really proud in our department that people across the board, no matter what party they affiliate with, or independents and Democrats, Republicans, all know that the Secretary of State office functions far more efficiently, effectively than ever before, and frankly, more than any other office in the country. What I've seen the through line is other agencies, from DHHS to unemployment agency, to just the fact that it can take up to 6 months to start a child care center in this state, or open a small business, or all the red tape that gets in the way of building a home in the state. That type of government efficiency, I think, needs to be addressed, and that's what I uniquely know how to do as someone who has run our most efficient agency and now wants to make all of state government run that efficiently to save all of our residents time and save them money.
Housing, childcare, education, affordability, urgent issues that you've spotlighted on your tour, as you've just mentioned. How has your role as a public servant over the years helped you understand those issues uniquely, and how can that understanding help Michiganders with those issues in the future?
Well, as someone who leads the largest agency, one of the largest agencies in our state that touches everyone and has offices in every county and town in our state, I've seen firsthand how people are struggling and how government can actually be a lifeline to making people's lives easier. So for me, I can recognize when someone says, look, it takes up to $90,000 to build a home in my community before I even put a brick in the ground. I know how to efficiently and effectively make that process of building a home more cost effective and affordable for residents everywhere from the UP and the Upper Peninsula to Benton Harbor to Warren, Michigan. So I've got a unique understanding of both the great diversity of our state, but also the common needs, which is simply just making government go well, efficient, effective, cost-effective, and saving people time and money and making their lives easier.
When it comes to reducing red tape in a government body, that can be really challenging. What is the biggest challenge you find as you've been trying to make things more efficient?
We don't think big enough oftentimes in this state. We often accept that because things have always been that way, that's the way it always has to be. And I don't believe that. I mean, when I took office, I saw people just fine with coming in, taking a ticket, and sitting and waiting hours to get their basic services done with the state. To me, that was unacceptable. To me, we can change that. And so one of the things we really need to break out of is this assumption that government is inefficient and it's never going to be on our side. I can make sure government is efficient, cost-effective, and on the sides of every resident of the state, and I've done it as Secretary of State. So my hope is that as governor, I can show the residents of Michigan that we can do big transformational things in this state. Government can make your life easier. It can show up when you need it and then get out of the way when you don't.
All right, let's talk about transparency. House Republicans have filed a lawsuit against your office seeking full access to electronic training materials your office says are sensitive for cybersecurity reasons. Where's the line between election integrity and transparency?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. And in collaboration with folks and even now with a judge, to say we need to make sure that we are prioritizing transparency. And indeed, we've turned over thousands of documents that we've also posted online at michigan.gov/election transparency. But at the same time, there's some information that could, if in the wrong hands, could enable someone to hack a voting machine or impersonate a clerk or interfere with the chain of custody of ballot security. So we want to keep that election security information out of the hands of people who could use it to interfere with election integrity. And that's the line we're trying to follow. But I believe in oversight, I believe in transparency, and we're trying to work collaboratively with the lawmakers who are asking for access to all this information. But I also do need to draw a line when they're asking for information that would harm the integrity or security of our processes.
Glad you brought that up. Who do you think should draw the line that we just talked about?
Well, I think ideally lawmakers and folks in the executive branch like myself can figure that out together. But when we can't or we reach an impasse, then I think a judge getting involved is helpful. And it creates a good precedent when oversight and transparency align with or run into the needs for security of the process. Inviting a mediator or a judge in to help figure this out with an eye towards balancing all of those priorities is a healthy, productive way to actually come to a resolution, which I hope we can in this matter.
You've been spearheading updates to the Michigan Transparency Network, consolidating lobbying, campaign finance, and disclosure data. What are the biggest obstacles to giving voters truly user-friendly access on who's influencing their government?
Well, interestingly, that's the goal, right? Making sure people have easy access to information about who's using money and other things to influence our public officials as they make laws that affect all of us. Typically, we've had a very antiquated system of doing that. It was formed 25 years ago, and it's a little bit clunky, and in an era of misinformation, isn't as user-friendly as we'd like residents to have access to. So we, again, in the vein of doing big, bold transformational things, we have completely begun the process of modernizing and upgrading that system. That means sometimes there's bumps along the way, but at the same time, I get daily and sometimes hourly updates about how we're working to make that system better and more transparent and accessible to all. And I'm very optimistic when we get on the other side of this upgrade, citizens and journalists alike will see how easier it is to access information about who's influencing our public officials, and I'll be proud to provide that information.
Can you explain more about your accountability metric in this regard?
Yeah, it's user friendliness. We invite people to come in, and one of the things that we didn't do at first that we're doing now is actually inviting that user feedback. So when people go to our website and say, this isn't working right, or we need to move this around, or I did this search and it took me too long, we now have a feedback loop that we call them tickets. People file a ticket or an issue they find, and we have an internal responsibility to solve that problem within a few hours or a few days if needed with the company that we're working with to build out this site. So that accountability comes through identifying the problem, fixing the problem, and engaging users in helping us do both.
I think everybody knows you're running for governor. You're recently given a formal warning by the Attorney General for improperly using a state building for a press conference to announce your candidacy for governor. I know we're a few months past what happened. I know you've released statements. What do you want Michiganders to know about that incident? Well,
look, I was there as a candidate dropping off my paperwork, but I understand since I was dropping off paperwork in the building where I work, it created confusion. It was important to me in that moment where I'm dropping off my paperwork to be accessible to the press and answer questions about the press was essentially all we did. And I appreciate the Attorney General's new interpretation of the law, and I'm glad the matter is resolved.
So Michigan's been called a ground zero for political division. You've been the target of threats before, lawsuits, protests. How has this shaped your view of public service, all that you've been through?
That we can do big transformational things that will improve people's lives, but it's not easy. It takes guts and grit and a willingness to sometimes, deal with threats and other types of things, people showing up at your home and the like, even potential violence. But if your North Star is just doing right by the people of Michigan, everyone, regardless of who they are or who they vote for, that can carry you through moments like that. And then you can look back and be glad at the good things you've been able to do. We have seen back-to-back the highest turnout elections in our state's history. No matter who wins those elections, my job and my pride is standing by those results. We've transformed our Secretary of State office to make using government more efficient than ever before. Even though that can be challenging and involves lots of gritty work, the end result is worth it if we can make people's lives easier.
How do you personally manage the human side of that pressure?
I have a wonderful family that's very supportive and a son that reminds me. Actually, I asked him the other day, I was having a particularly challenging moment, and he said, "Mom, if you give up, what happens to me?" Wow. And that's it, right? At the end of the day, I want to make Michigan the best place to be a kid, to raise a kid, and call home for all of us. And that is what drives me, and I see the need, the urgency in addressing that in the eyes of my kid as he grows up here.
When it comes to handling pressure, when you're sitting across from lawmakers who publicly criticized your office or even filed suit against it, how do you stay focused on the work and not the politics?
It's hard, but I'm not a politician. I actually come at this as an educator, as a mom, as a military spouse who just wants government to work well. So I try to see where someone else is coming from, really chip away the political noise around it and just try to help meet people where they are. what I hope is our common goal, to make government work well for everyone, to save people money, to drive down the cost of living, to make things more affordable, to improve access to affordable housing. I know every resident in Michigan wants our loved ones to be happy and healthy and safe and nearby. So how can we work together to do that? I think we can disagree without being disagreeable. I believe in civility, and I believe that type of leadership needs to be adhered to, even if those around you aren't necessarily playing by that same type of approach.
When it comes to working together, how can we as a society teach our kids resilience and civic engagement in such a polarized time politically?
It's so critical, because our kids are going to inherit our democracy, and they have to believe in government as a force for good, and also in collaboration as a way to solve problems. So I think our leaders can and must model that behavior. I'm determined to do it, and I hope ultimately, as I continue to find ways to lead and to serve the people of Michigan, that we can push other public officials to lead in that same way, data-driven, solution-oriented, rising above partisan divide, and just getting things done for the people of Michigan, for our families, for our kids, and for all of us.
Madam Secretary, when you're off duty, how do you remain grounded? What are some of your tools?
I'm a runner, so I exercise and run, and I really enjoy the outdoors of Michigan. And I spend time with my family, sometimes jumping on the trampoline in our backyard and just reconnecting with, what makes us all, united as Michiganders, the beautiful state that we live in, and our loved ones and the people around us who help make this home our home.
Who inspired your public service journey? Is there one person in particular or a group of people?
John Lewis, really. I started my career in Alabama doing civil rights work, and it was being in Selma and his work to bravely, march forward into certain violence because he believed in the power of the vote and the power of the people. That inspires me to, face down any threats or challenges that come my way and march forward anyway in furtherance of our Constitution, the principles that actually make us great as a country, and our democracy, and uplifting every voice and every vote.
Can you share a moment of unexpected kindness or grace that you may have experienced during your listening tour or time in office?
Yeah, I was in Warren, Michigan, actually, and as a part of our listening tour, and this older woman was talking about how difficult it was as a retiree in Michigan to make ends meet, and now with all of the cuts and threats at the federal level, her anxiety that she'd be able to still even have access to health care in the state. And I talked to her and I said, I hear you and I see your pain. And we held hands and shared a moment of just my determination to do whatever I could to alleviate her pain. And she gave me a big hug at the end, and I'll never forget that, because that's the work, to see people's pain and try to make their lives a little bit easier. See people's pain and do something about it. That's my goal as Secretary of State, and that will be my goal as governor.
When it comes to Medicaid cuts that are underway with the big beautiful bill, one side says the intent is to reduce waste, to reduce red tape, to reduce fraud that's happening, which I think is undoubtedly happening on some level. How do you find the balance between making the needed cuts and reducing the red tape, and also preserving these services for people that really need it?
I think with a scalpel and with data, not a chainsaw, right? We don't have to bully our way to improving things. I found, as the Secretary of State of this very large department I inherited, you can actually increase government efficiency, save people money, make things easier for folks without having to use a chainsaw and tearing it all up, or firing people, or doing things that would ultimately tear apart what actually is working. So I think you can improve government and actually engage in really transformational new ideas in how government can show up and make people's lives easier in a very data-driven, solution-oriented, frankly, oftentimes nonpartisan way, just trying to focus on getting things done. That's how I've been successful as Secretary of State, and one of the things I want to do as governor is really recenter all of us in recognizing that what brings us together is far better than what can divide us, and Michigan can lead the way in a uniquely divisive time in our country, and showing the nation that we can get things done together, collaboratively, with the truth and data and the law on our side, and with the people of Michigan as our North Star.
If you were elected governor of Michigan, how do you think you'd be able to work with President Trump?
I'd work with anyone who is focused on improving the safety, security, and economic prosperity of our residents in a truthful, data-driven way. But I'm also willing to stand up to anyone, no matter how powerful, and I've shown this as Secretary of State, who would stand in the way of those things. And I think we have to allow data, truth, the people we serve to be our North Star, and be committed to working with anyone and everyone always to improve people's lives, but also, again, be unafraid to stand up to people who would stand in the way of that goal.
Anything we didn't talk about that we should have talked about, Madam Secretary?
Well, one of the ideas that really resonated with me around the state was mobility. How do we get around the state of Michigan? And something I've begun talking about, and really, as a governor, I hope would cement the work that I do, is building high-speed light rail all across the state, so that you can get from Detroit to Traverse City in under 3 hours, or Detroit to Chicago in under 3 hours, or Detroit to Grand Rapids in 1. So investing in high-speed light rail can help improve our economic prosperity as a state. And secondly, the need to ensure our education system is among the top 10% in the country. We can't invite the best and the brightest to live here and make Michigan their home if we don't have an education system that is among the best in the country. So as an educator, I'm uniquely positioned to reform our education system. As an administrator, I know how to build things like this light rail and get it done for the people of our state.
Follow-up question on the education. That's so important to, I think, a lot of the gubernatorial candidates right now, because Michigan has so much work to do in that department. How do you improve Michigan's educational system while also working with teachers' unions that get criticized so much for hamstringing that process?
Well, I'm an educator myself. I ran a large educational institution right here in the city of Detroit, Wayne State Law School, and was able to work with everyone to turn it around and make it one of the best law schools in the country by looking at data and by focusing us all on our goal, which is providing a good education system for our kids. In Michigan right now, and I've also seen this as the daughter of special education teachers growing up, we have a one-size-fits-all funding mechanism that is antiquated, out of date, and ineffective. So we need to do away with the one-size-fits-all funding and really generate new opportunities to invest resources in all of our schools in ways that will actually meet the needs of those schools. That means investing in wraparound services, mental health support, after-school support, summer support, and also broadening what we're teaching so that we're giving students experiential opportunities and apprenticeships so they can go right into the workforce, and expanding how we're teaching reading and the basics academics so that we can prepare our kids for the jobs of tomorrow. I'm very passionate about making sure our education system is among the best in the country. And as the daughter of educators, a mom and an educator myself, I come at this with a sense of urgency and a determination to get this done.
You're talking about a lot of, it seems like, additions, wraparound services.
Yeah.
How do you do that without raising taxes or asking the voters for more money?
We do need to re-examine how we are funding our schools, because decades of disinvestment are what has got us here to this place where our schools are among the bottom of too many rankings instead of among the top. So I do believe the next governor will have to identify new sources of revenue for investing in our schools, but also investing that money wisely with transparent mechanisms and accountability metrics so that we're tracking the money and making sure it is directly being spent on improving or supporting our educators and improving educational outcomes for our students. So as someone who has overseen elections in our state, it's a very decentralized system like our schools. It's a combination of a top approach where you have goals and benchmarks and necessary funding, and then a bottom-up approach where you're listening to people in all of our 800 school districts and developing case-by-case needs so that we're investing in the infrastructure, the education, and the support that each school uniquely needs, and identifying, in partnership with local communities, new sources of revenue to meet those needs.
And accountability, I think, would have to be a big part of a new educational system that you're talking about. You'd have to have the metrics for gauging how people are doing, and then there'd have to be an accountability structure, I would imagine.
Yes, and accountability doesn't mean shutting down schools. It means identifying schools that are falling behind and then identifying what resources and support they need at a granular level to meet those metrics. I mean, it's the same thing I've done not just as the chief election officer, but as the chief motor vehicle officer, and running over 130 branch offices. We track everyone individually so that if folks are falling behind in our metrics, wait times, for example, we don't shut them down. We help them meet that metric. And that's the same type of approach we need to accountability in our schools.
Let's talk high-speed light rail. Grand idea. I think if we could just snap our fingers and have it, that'd be amazing. Getting to that point can be challenging, and I think a lot of other states have proven that. You mentioned Florida did a great job of getting that done in 6 years. California, it's a little more controversial there.
Yeah.
How do you get on the side of getting it done quickly and without asking people again for more money? Is there a way to do that?
I think public-private partnerships are going to be key. It's what has worked in other states to efficiently build high-speed light rail and really communicate to the communities they run through the economic boon that they will see if you have a stop from Detroit to Traverse City in Pontiac and Flint. That can generate economic prosperity in those cities that through investing in them can grow and expand, not just from a financial standpoint, but in many other ways ways as well. I mean, imagine you'd be able to get from Detroit to Flint in 30 minutes, stop and have lunch in Flint, and then head on up to Traverse City. The economic investment that can generate and prosperity for those communities is significant. And so in partnering with philanthropic foundations and small businesses and local employers in those areas, they can help us support the building out of that system. But I'm talking with folks in places like Florida and other parts of the country that have successfully built this high-speed light rail in a relatively short amount of time to identify specifically what's the expertise, what's the partnerships, what's the data that we need to bring to bear so that we can get this done efficiently and actually deliver these transformational results to our citizens. But imagine a light rail that goes all around our state with spurs out to Toronto and Chicago. You can also expand our talent pool for businesses where you could hire someone who lives in Toronto but commutes to Detroit to work here or vice versa. So the economic opportunities, the transformational impact high-speed light rail could have in our state is extraordinary. And I hope as governor that's something that I can uniquely bring to the state. Detroit has been seeing for the first couple of years that they've seen in decades population growth. We've seen such amazing things happening in the city of Detroit. It feels like there's a renaissance going on. How do we keep that? If you were governor, how would you keep that going? Well, I think in certain parts of the city, yes, but in other parts, not so much. I'm a resident of the city, and I've also seen firsthand a lot of the challenges the city is still enduring. And I'm optimistic that as governor, I'll be able to work with the next mayor of Detroit and the mayors of Flint and Grand Rapids and Benton Harbor and Muskegon, all of whom have very important economic visions for improving their citizens' prosperity and educational opportunities in those cities. So for me, good governance is all about collaborative partnerships, achieving common goals together by setting them together, having accountability and mechanisms to get there, and then working together outside of government as well with business leaders, community leaders to get things done. So as governor, my job will be to make housing more affordable for everyone, to make education, quality education available for everyone, healthcare safe and available to everyone, and working with all mayors throughout the state to get there is going to be a critical component that I'll be uniquely able to bring to the table. What do you think is the main component to making homes more affordable in the state of Michigan? How would we do that? You know, it starts with making it more affordable to build those homes, the amount of pre-building requirements we have in the state can be enormously costly for people trying to build not just in single family homes, but larger developments. So one of the things we need to do is strip away a lot of the inefficiencies in government right now that don't only make it more expensive or timely to build affordable housing, but also stand in the way of access to affordable child care centers or starting a small business or all the things that we need to do to make things run more smoothly in our state. The interesting thing as I finished the state tour that I really struck by was that no matter what pain point someone was describing to me, whether it was the pain of not having access to childcare or not being able to buy a home in the community they want to live in or drinking unsafe water in the communities they live in, there was this through line of government not working well. And that is the one thing I know how to do, to make state government work well across the board. And I think the pathway to solving a lot of our greatest problems in Michigan is simply making the operation of government more efficient, more effective, less bureaucratic, more cost effective, and working well for every resident in this state. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for the time. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.